Hey everyone, welcome to The Explainer. Today we're diving straight into some of the absolute biggest challenges to human survival. We're talking about natural disasters, human-made hazards, and those everyday accidents that always seem to catch us completely off guard. But more importantly, we're going to figure out exactly how we can manage them.
Here is our roadmap for today. We'll be covering the threat to society, when nature strikes, human-made hazards, everyday accidents, and finally, mastering disaster management. Let's jump in.
Starting with Section 1, the threat to society and why it's a growing danger.
You know, disasters have actually always been around. Sometimes they even help balance out ecosystems. But lately, they are becoming way more frequent and honestly, a lot more threatening to us. So the first thing we really need to wrap our heads around is the divide here. On one side, we've got natural disasters. Think of things caused by internal Earth processes, like earthquakes or extreme weather. But on the flip side, we have disasters that are directly sparked or completely blown out of proportion by human carelessness. It's an absolutely vital distinction, and it's going to frame everything else we talk about today.
Okay, moving on to part 2, when nature strikes. Let's look at the sheer power of the elements. So this is the raw, unfiltered power of nature. On the left, you've got cyclones. These form when low-pressure zones in the atmosphere centralize into this incredibly violent spinning system of wind. And on the right, severe thunderstorms. Lightning is actually kind of fascinating when you break it down. It happens when water droplets inside those huge, towering cumulonimbus storm clouds literally rub against each other because of powerful airwaves. Positive charges collect at the top, negative charges at the bottom, and boom, you get that massive electrical discharge we call lightning. Now take a look at this number, 350 to 400. That's not just a random stat, that is the wind speed in kilometers per hour that a severe cyclone can actually hit. It's almost hard to picture, right? To put that human cost into perspective, a single cyclone that hit Sri Lanka back in November 1978 tragically took 900 lives and just completely leveled massive amounts of property. Nature at this scale is just unrelenting.
Which brings us to another terrifying force of nature, the tsunami. Whether they're triggered by seabed earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, or, believe it or not, even meteors, tsunamis unleash just an incredible amount of power. And unlike a normal wave you'd see at the beach, a tsunami's energy spreads out in all directions. It just rolls completely over coastal areas, totally destroying whatever infrastructure happens to be in its path.
To truly grasp the stakes here, we really just need to look back at December 26, 2004. On that single day, roughly 31,500 people lost their lives, and another 550,000 were unexpectedly displaced by one disaster. And we're talking about people just going about their normal, everyday lives. Passengers sitting in buses, vans, even trains. Entire towns, bustling fishing harbors, and tourist hotels were just completely wiped out across the region.
Then, on the exact opposite end of the spectrum from massive waves, we have droughts. Now, these generally come in two forms. There's climatic drought, which is basically just a lack of rain, and then there's hydrological drought, meaning there's not enough groundwater. Officially speaking, a drought is declared when a district gets less than 75% of its usual rainfall, or if there are 15 consecutive dry days. And the ripple effects? They're absolutely devastating. It disrupts hydroelectricity, destroys crops, and takes a severe toll on both human and animal life.
All right, Section 3, human-made hazards. This is where we look at how we're exacerbating the damage.
Because the reality is, nature rarely acts alone anymore. Human activity is actively turning these natural phenomena into deadly disasters. Take floods, for instance. In places like Sri Lanka, getting heavy rainfall is totally natural. But when you factor in activities like intensive sand mining, which directly alters the riverbeds, well, add in some illegal construction and poor urban drainage, and you practically guarantee that a heavy rain is going to turn into a highly destructive flood.
Our careless consumption of natural resources just magnifies this destruction. I mean, when we clear out coastal vegetation, tear down mangroves, or damage coral reefs, we are literally stripping away the Earth's natural shock absorbers. So when that tsunami hits, there's absolutely nothing left to slow it down. And it's the exact same story with improper garbage disposal. It blocks up drains and canals, basically ensuring that when the monsoon arrives, all that water has nowhere to go except right into our homes.
Moving on to Section 4, everyday accidents and the dangers around us.
You know, disasters aren't just these massive, once-in-a-decade weather events. They're actually immediate hazards that threaten us in our homes, at work, and in our local neighborhoods every single day. And sometimes, this threat comes right from the animal kingdom.
As human populations expand into new territories, we're seeing acute human-elephant conflicts that lead to some really tragic fatalities. And on a more everyday level, things like sudden attacks from stray dogs or venomous snake bites in the dark, those require us to just constantly be on our guard.
But honestly, often the hazard is entirely of our own making. Simple carelessness is what creates tragedy. Think about it. Eating unwashed or expired food can lead to severe food poisoning. Giving elderly folks or kids unprescribed dosage of medication, that can be fatal. Then you've got behavioral hazards, like driving under the influence of liquor, or even just driving when you're experiencing extreme emotions, like intense anger or sadness. And right at home, simply leaving electrical plug points unprotected around toddlers is, well, it's a disaster waiting to happen.
So when we're faced with all these overwhelming threats, everything from 400-kilometer-per-hour winds to just a simple unprotected electrical socket, we really have to stop and ask ourselves, how do we actively protect ourselves? How do we actually minimize all this damage?
Which brings us to our final section, Part 5, Mastering Disaster Management and Taking Action. Look, it's impossible to prevent natural phenomena from happening, but through awareness and getting organized, we can drastically minimize the damage. Preparation is literally everything. You should always have an emergency pack ready to go with the essentials: bottled water, some biscuits, a torch, and a battery-operated radio so you can actually hear media warnings. If a thunderstorm hits, disconnect your electricity at home immediately. If you're stuck outside, don't touch anything metal, get out of isolated open spaces, and whatever you do, avoid open vehicles. Get off the bicycle and stay far, far away from tractors.
Now, if a disaster does strike your community, survival becomes a total team effort. It is absolutely our duty to support the victims with deep compassion and to safeguard their dignity. That means stepping up to provide proper first aid, helping get victims to hospitals, and actively assisting defense and health services. But just as importantly, it means stepping in to strictly prevent theft, looting, and any kind of antisocial behavior when our communities are at their most vulnerable.
Okay, I highly recommend screenshotting this right now. These aren't just numbers, they are actual lifelines you should have saved in your phone today. 110 gets you fire and ambulance. 119 connects you to police emergency. If you spot illegal environmental destruction that could trigger a hazard, you dial 1991. And for advice on rehabilitation or reporting dangerous drugs, the number is 1984. Having these saved can literally save a life when every single second counts.
To wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a stark, undeniable reality straight from our source text. In our lifetime, we will have to face a hazard or disaster anytime, anywhere. We must always be vigilant. You simply can't put off your preparations, thinking disasters only happen to other people on the evening news. They happen in our homes, on our roads, and right in our own communities. So, armed with all this knowledge, what is the one step you're going to take today to make sure you and your family are ready?